My darlings, gather close. Draw the velvet curtains. Pour something scandalously inappropriate for the hour, because tonight, oh tonight, we are not merely observing catastrophe, we are witnessing the moment society's polite delusions crack like porcelain under pressure. You see, while Hawksmere's gentle hills hum with wounded resonance, the drawing rooms of Europe are humming with something far more tedious: denial. In Vienna, the aristocracy insists the tremors beneath their parquet floors are seasonal settling. In Paris, certain academicians are publishing essays declaring that magic is simply an outdated metaphor for geological misinterpretation. How charming, how tidy, how catastrophically wrong. And then, of course, there is Alps-de-Pierre, the jewel of engineered civility, the city that once prided itself on marrying clockwork precision with alpine majesty. I attended a winter salon there 3 years ago. Frosted chandeliers, string quartets tuned to mathematical perfection. Hot chocolate served at precisely the same temperature in every cup, not 1 degree higher, not 1 degree lower. Perfection, they called it. Perfection, my loves, is often just tyranny dressed in lace. There were whispers even then. A young engineer boasting too loudly about harnessing the inconvenient volatility of the earth. An elderly baroness muttering that the mountain no longer sang beneath her estate. Investors from the fallen syndicate slipping through back corridors like moths to a flame, and always, always that name murmured with equal parts admiration and unease. The Maestro. Ah, yes, Valerius. Frye's most gifted protégé. Where Frye hesitated, Valerius calculates. Where others fear, he refines. I once saw him at a symposium in Prague, tall, spectral, already wearing those smoked quartz lenses long before his notoriety required mystique. He spoke of silence as if it were salvation. Harmony, he said, is achieved when all discordant notes are removed. Removed. Such a civilized word for annihilation. Society applauded him naturally. They always applaud the promise of safety, predictability, an end to storms. No more inconvenient earthquakes, no more wild surges of ungovernable magic. Imagine it, a world where nothing unexpected ever happens. No wildness, no upheaval, no song. Some called it progress, others called it stability. I call it embalming the living world. And now, how exquisitely ironic. The machine built to silence one mountain has begun to siphon another. The stilling engine does not merely cage a seal, it feeds, it synchronizes, it reaches, which brings us back to Hawksmere and to Eamon. Poor, luminous, fragile Eamon, our reluctant vessel of the land's voice. While duchesses debate hemline widths and ministers draft treaties about grain tariffs, he wakes with crystalline fractures in his skin because somewhere a mountain is screaming. Is it not deliciously tragic? Society obsesses over etiquette while the world's metaphysical spine is being drilled hollow. And now a rider collapses at the gate. A daughter of the Alps arrives, frost-burned and hunted. She brings schematics, pleas, and the kind of truth that ruins dinner parties forever. The game, my dears, has escalated. This is no longer a matter of Hawksmere's quiet survival. This is continental, existential, architectural in its ambition. The Crimson mechanism is no longer theoretical. It is operational. Let us begin.
Chapter 6. The Emissary from Alps-de-Pierre. The Bleeding Dream. The dream was not a dream. Eamon knew this even as the green-tinged fog of sleep pulled him under. For months, his rest had been a journey into deeper strata of consciousness, where the warden's slow, planetary thoughts moved like continental plates. He had learned to navigate those depths as a diver navigates a sunless sea, finding strange peace in the enormity. This was different. This was violation. A shriek, crystalline and raw, tore through the fabric of the dreamscape. It was not sound, but pure, distilled agony, a frequency that shattered metaphor into sensory reality. Eamon felt it in what remained of his bones, a piercing cold that burned, a vibration that threatened to unmake the coherence of his soul. Images, a mountain of pure white, bleeding black tears from wounds of brass and steel, gears grinding against the living rock, a chorus of voices, not singing, but screaming in perfect, tortured harmony, their pain organized, catalogued, utilized. Sensation, a sucking pull, a siphon. He felt a thread of something vital, the quiet green warmth of Hawksmere's own pulse, being drawn away, siphoned through invisible ley lines toward that distant, shrieking peak. The Dominion was being bled to feed a machine. Knowledge. This was not random. This was design. The scream was a beacon, a distress call from a kindred spirit being murdered with meticulous mechanical precision. Eamon jolted awake in his chamber in the gatehouse tower, not with a gasp, but with a silent, full-body convulsion. Green light, not from the room, but from within him, pulsed once beneath his skin, illuminating the web of crystalline veins that now traced his forearms and throat. The rough wool blanket beneath him was dusted with a fine, glittering powder, minute fragments of himself, shed in the spasm. He sat up, his movements slower than they once were, as if moving through deep water. The stone of the tower, once silent, now hummed a constant, low-grade anxiety to his senses. The warden was troubled. The dream had been a broadcast, and the valley, the living receiver, was resonating with sympathetic pain. Dawn was a gray smear beyond the arrow slit. The Dominion was quiet, but it was the quiet of a held breath. He dressed, simple breeches and a tunic that hung looser on his frame each week, and placed a hand on the cold wall. "I heard," he murmured, his voice rough with disuse. The stone warmed slightly under his palm. A feeling, not a word, returned. Danger. Not here, but coming, here. The peace was over. The cracks in the watch. Len found the first physical proof an hour later, on the southern border walk, where the Dominion's reality softened into the mundane world. "Like frost," he growled to Alianor, who had come at his urgent summons. He pointed, his calloused finger tracing a line on the weathered limestone parapet. "But it ain't." Alianor knelt, ignoring the damp stone that soaked into her gown. The frost was a delicate, fern-like pattern of white crystal growing from the mortar. She touched it. It was cold, but with a deep, empty cold that stole warmth. It crumbled at her touch into a fine, metallic-smelling dust. "It wasn't here yesterday," Len said. His face, forever etched with siege-time harshness, was grim. And looked down. She peered over the wall. The boundary here was marked by a creek that had once burbled cheerfully. Now, its water moved in perfect, silent, concentric circles, as if falling into an unseen drain. The grass on the far bank was bleached bone-white. On the Dominion side, it glowed with a faint, unhealthy bioluminescence. "The land's sick," Len said, the words forced out like a confession. "It's leaking, or something's poisoning it." "It's not poison," a voice said behind them. Eamon stood there, having approached with his new, soundless tread. His gray eyes, always intense, now held depths of borrowed green. He looked at the crystalline growth. "It's a scar, a resonance burn." He placed his palm flat on the afflicted stone. A faint, painful hiss, like water on a hot griddle, sounded. The white crystals darkened, receded a fraction. Eamon withdrew his hand with a slight flinch. A red, blistering burn marked his palm. "The song is out of tune. Something is pulling on the cord until it frays." "Pulling from where?" Alianor asked, though the nightmare images of a bleeding mountain flashed in her mind. Eamon just looked south, through the morning mist that shrouded the hills beyond their sanctuary. Far and getting closer. The factor's equation. In the solar, now part library, part war room, the factor was waiting. The stolen syndicate archives were spread across the great oak table. Vellum schematics, copperplate ledgers, Dr. Frye's near-illegible scrawl on alchemical parchment. He did not look up as they entered, his finger tracing a line of symbols. You felt it, he stated, not asking. We saw it, Alianor corrected, taking her seat at the table's head. Tom entered behind them, his steward's face pale. A localized dissonance event, the factor said, tapping a schematic titled Harmonic Theft, Synchronization of Prime Seals, predicted by Frye's secondary equations. He theorized that stabilizing one volatile geothaumatic node, a seal, would require drawing harmonic balance from the others, like tuning a string by referencing another. He looked up, his neutral eyes missing nothing. He never intended to tune them. He intended to silence them all, one by one, using each as a battery to power the suppression of the next, a cascade of control. Tom leaned heavily on the table. You're saying what's happening at our border? It's because someone, somewhere, is turning on another mechanism? Not turning on, the factor murmured. Perfecting. Frye's work here was the prototype, disrupted. His core theories, his blueprints, were scattered when the syndicate fell. It appears another party has acquired them, and they are less sentimental than Lady Constance. They are not bothering with pacification or treaties. They are imposing order by direct resonant force. Can we stop it? From here? Alianor's voice was steel. Unlikely. It is an engineered frequency, designed to interact with the seal's native resonance. To counter it, one would need to be at the source, to break the transmitter. The factor's gaze slid to Eamon, or to introduce a more compelling frequency, a counter-song. Eamon met his look. It would hear me. If I sang to stop it, it would know exactly what I am, where I am. Yes, the factor said simply, it would. The terrible calculus hung in the air, intervene and expose their heart, or hide and watch their home be slowly drained to death. The storm breaks. The decision was made for them that afternoon. The weather, which in the Dominion had become a gentle expression of the warden's moods, soft rains, dappled sunlight, turned violent. A bruised purple cloud gathered with unnatural speed over the southern peaks. No rain fell. Instead, the air itself grew thick, charged with a pressure that made ears pop and teeth ache. A sound built, not from the sky, but from the ground. A deep, sub-auditory hum that vibrated in the chest and churned the stomach. Animals fled toward the keep, or froze in terrified paralysis. The sentient trees at the forest's edge recoiled, their branches curling in on themselves like clenched fists. Alianor stood in the inner courtyard, feeling the wrongness seep into her very blood. This was not an attack of men. This was an attack of principle, a law of reality being imposed where it did not belong. Len's shout came from the gatehouse. Rider! Single rider! Coming hard through the malaise! They rushed to the southern gate. Beyond the shimmering, nauseating border, the landscape wavered like a mirage. Through the distortion, a figure on a lathered horse emerged, galloping with reckless, desperate speed. The horse was magnificent, a tall gray Andalusian, but it stumbled, its eyes rolling white, foam flecking its muzzle. Its rider, clad in dark, travel-stained wool and leather, was slumped low, clinging to its neck. As they crossed the invisible boundary into the Dominion, the effect was instantaneous. The oppressive hum cut off. The horse staggered, its panic subsiding into confusion, and collapsed to its knees, heaving. The rider rolled from the saddle, hitting the turf with a solid thud and lying still. Open the gate, Alianor commanded. The small postern door swung open. Len and two guards were out first, weapons drawn, scanning the distorted horizon before dragging rider and horse inside. The great oak gates boomed shut, sealing out the dissonant field. The rider was a woman. Her face was streaked with grime and what looked like old crystalline tears, frozen tracks that had cut faint lines in her skin. Her clothing was finely made but torn, scorched in places as if by cold fire. One hand was wrapped in a blood-crusted bandage. Clutched in the other, even in unconsciousness, was a leather tube sealed with a lump of black wax. Alpine stitch, Tom noted, examining her tunic. And that brand on the saddle, that's from the Swiss cantons, mountains. Get her to the infirmary. Bess, Alianor called. Her maid, now the keeper of the branded medicine chest and a healer in her own right, hurried forward. See to her, and to the horse. Everyone else, eyes on the border. Len, double the watches. Something chased her here. The awakening. The woman did not wake so much as she surfaced from a depth of exhaustion and terror. It happened in the infirmary, a quiet room warmed by hearthlight and the scent of herbs. Bess was changing the bandage on her hand when her eyes, a striking pale blue like high glacier ice, snapped open. She did not startle. She assessed. The room, Bess's kind face, the window showing the impossible green-tinged twilight of the Dominion. "You are in Hawksmere," Alianor said from the doorway. She entered, holding the leather tube. "The wardened Dominion. You are safe." The woman's gaze locked onto the tube. "You have it." Her voice was accented, melodic, but hoarse from disuse and screaming. "Open it. First, tell me who you are and what you brought to my door." A flicker of impatience, then resignation. "I am Katharina von Amsel, of the Frye of Alps-de-Pierre." She pushed herself up on her elbows, wincing. "What I brought is a death warrant and a plea for clemency for all of us." Alianor broke the wax seal. It bore the imprint of a mountain peak encircled by a gear, and slid out a heavy roll of parchment. It was not one document, but three. The first was a detailed geographical survey, showing a mountain range with one peak marked Omega. The second was an engineering schematic, horrifyingly familiar, a cross-section of a mountain with a complex, multi-level structure of gears, lenses, and crystalline arrays drilled into its heart. It was titled Project Stilling Engine, Phase 3, Operational. The third was a single sheet of vellum covered in frantic, elegant script. A letter. "To the keeper of the Alpha Seal, the so-called Warden Dominion. If this reaches you, our time is short. They call it the Stilling Engine. It does not extract power. It imposes silence. It seeks to cure the world of its soul. My people, in their fear of the song beneath the stone, have let engineers and alchemists from the fallen syndicate build it. They believe they are creating paradise, a land of perfect, predictable order. No quakes, no storms, no wild magic. They are instead creating a tomb. The Omega Seal does not sleep like your warden. It sings, a terrible, beautiful, wild song. The engine cages that song, and in its silencing, it is drinking the life from the land. The forests are turning to glass. The rivers run backwards. The air does not move. Worse, the engine is hungry. To maintain its zone of order, it reaches out along the lines of power. It is drawing the vitality from other places, including, I fear, from you. It seeks to synchronize all seals into one silent, obedient chord. I am a daughter of the mountain. I hear its dying scream. I have sabotaged what I can, but I am one woman. They hunt me. You are the only ones who have lived with a seal and not broken it. You must help us break the machine, or its silence will spread and swallow the world's last songs, one by one. Katharina. Alianor lowered the pages, her blood running cold. The nightmare, the bleeding border, Frye's grand design in new, ruthless hands. It was all true. "The they you speak of," the factor said. He had entered silently. "Who leads them?" Katharina looked at him, sensing a kindred spirit of calculation. "A council of my city's elders, beguiled by promises of safety. But the mind behind the engine, he is a man who calls himself the Maestro. He was Frye's protege. He believes Frye was a visionary, but too hesitant. He has no such qualms." "And the synchronization?" Alianor asked. "How long?" "The engine achieved primary stability a month ago," Katharina said, her voice hollow. "The bleed began then. You felt it. With each passing week, its reach extends, its appetite grows. It has perhaps 2 months before its resonance becomes irreversible. It will lock into the global harmonic lattice. After that, to stop it would be to shatter the lattice itself. The resulting cascade," she shook her head, "it would be the unmaking of every place of power on Earth, a metaphysical cataclysm." Silence engulfed the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The weight of the world had just been dropped onto their shoulders. The Council of War. They gathered in the solar once more. Alianor, Eamon, Tom, Len, the Factor, and now Katharina, bolstered by Bess's broths and wrapped in a borrowed cloak. The documents lay in the center of the table like an accusation. "We cannot ignore this," Alianor began, the sovereign speaking. "It is not charity. It is self-preservation. Our border is bleeding. Our people are dreaming its pain. Our warden is distressed. This stilling engine is a disease, and we are in its path." Tom, the pragmatist, looked ill. "My lady, to intervene, we would have to leave the Dominion, cross a continent, infiltrate a fortified city built into a mountain, destroy a machine of unimaginable complexity guarded by fanatics. With what army? We are stewards of a strange garden, not a military power." "We have other powers," Eamon said quietly. All eyes turned to him. He had been silent, his hand resting on the table, the green veins pulsing faintly. "The land's power. My connection. I can hear the Omega seals scream. It is a wound in the world. I can find it. I may be able to speak to it." "And in doing so, you would ring a dinner bell for this Maestro," the Factor countered. "Your unique resonance would be a beacon. He would know the fabled land's voice had come to his doorstep. He would want to study you, capture you, integrate you into his design." He leaned forward. "You would not be a soldier. You would be a component he lacks." "Then we don't let him see Eamon," Len growled. "We go in quiet, like we did in the siege. Sabotage, a knife in the gears." "The engine is not just gears," Katarina interjected. "It is a resonant field, a concept made manifest. You cannot knife a concept. It must be countered, unmade with a different truth." She looked at Eamon, her gaze searching, awed and pitying. "He is right. It requires a song, a stronger song." "So we send Eamon into the heart of enemy territory to sing a duet with a dying mountain, hoping his voice is louder than their machine," Tom summarized, his tone dripping with despair. "It is madness." "It is the only move on the board," Alianor said. Her mind was racing, the old gambler's cold calculation settling over her. "We go, but not just Eamon. A team, small, precise. Katarina is our guide. Len is our shield. The Factor is our key to their politics and machines." She paused, her gaze landing on the steward. "Tom, you will hold Hawksmere. You and Bess and Father Clement. You are the heart that stays behind. You keep the home fire burning, and you manage the story. If we fail, you make peace with whatever comes." Tom looked stricken, but after a moment, he gave a slow, proud nod. The burden of home was his. "And you, my lady?" the Factor asked, though he knew the answer. "I go," Alianor said. There was no debate in her tone. "I am the sovereign who made the treaty. This is an act of state, and," her eyes found Eamon's, "he is my responsibility, my choice. I see it through." A profound silence settled. The path was chosen. It led out of their sanctuary, into a wide, hostile world, toward a mountain that screamed. The parting of the ways. Preparations began in a feverish, silent rush. They would travel light, as merchants or pilgrims. The Factor worked on forged passes and backstory. Len selected weapons that could be concealed or explained, hunting bows, long knives, tool belts that could double as armories. Katarina, recovering with a speed that spoke of iron will, drew maps, detailing the city of Harmonium built into and around Alps-de-Pierre. She described the Maestro's guard, the harmonic sentinels, who wore resonance-dampening armor, the checkpoints, the culture of silent efficiency. In the carved clearing, now a serene grove of singing crystal, Eamon made his own preparations. He stood in the center, barefoot on the moss, and opened his senses. He reached not for the warden, but through it, along the painful, taut line of stolen resonance that led south and east. He followed the scream. The vision that flooded him was more intense than the dream. Cold stone, the taste of copper and ozone, a vast cavernous chamber lit by the cold blue light of azure resonite. In the center, a massive, faceted crystal, the heart of the Omega seal, was encased in a lattice of pulsating brass and silver. Wires like veins pierced it, drawing out its light, filtering it through spinning gears that chopped its wild song, into a sterile, uniform hum. Around it, figures in gray robes moved, adjusting dials, reading scrolls that glowed with equations, and presiding over it all, a tall, slender man with hair the color of ash, his eyes covered by lenses of smoked quartz. He held a tuning fork that vibrated silently, and he smiled as the machine consumed the mountain's soul. Eamon recoiled, gasping. The vision had carried a name, a title that echoed in the engineered silence, Maestro Valerius. "What did you see?" Alianor's voice was soft beside him. "The prison," Eamon whispered. "And the warden. He enjoys his work." On the eve of their departure, the Dominion gave them a farewell gift. The weather cleared, the oppressive hum at the border receding slightly, as if the warden were gathering its strength. That night, under a sky dusted with strange, slow-moving stars that seemed to pulse in time with the land's heartbeat, the people gathered in the inner yard. No speeches were made, no grand farewell. But as Alianor, Eamon, Len, the factor, and Katerina prepared to slip out the postern gate, people approached. They pressed small things into their hands: a lucky stone, a sprig of evergreen, a loaf of journey bread. Bess hugged Alianor fiercely, then Eamon, her tears leaving dark spots on his tunic. Father Clement gave a blessing that sounded like a plea. Tom clasped Alianor's hand, then Eamon's shoulder. "Come home," he said, the words simple and enormous. Then they were through the gate, moving silently into the buffering zone of twisted reality at the border. The air grew thick, the hum pressing on their ears. Eamon led, a faint green aura clinging to him, parting the dissonance like a bow wave. They reached the far side, where the world was once again mundanely solid, cold, and dark. They looked back. The Dominion was a shimmer in the air, a mirage of impossible forests and gentle light, now wrapped in a faint, sickly halo of white static, the visible scar of the engine's bleed. Katerina adjusted her pack, her face set toward the south. "The way is long, and they will be looking for me." Len hefted his pack, his eyes scanning the dark woods. "Let them look." The factor melted into the shadows ahead, the pathfinder. Alianor took one last long look at the shimmering home she was leaving behind, at the impossible responsibility she carried. Then she turned to the man beside her, whose eyes held reflected starlight and deep earthfire. "Ready?" Eamon did not look back. He was already listening to the distant, agonized song only he could hear, the thread that would guide them across a continent. He nodded, once. Together, they walked away from Sanctuary, into the grinding gears of a world trying to silence its own soul. The true war for the Crimson Mechanism had begun.
And so they leave. No fanfare, no trumpets, no glittering cavalry banners flapping in theatrical wind. Just a handful of souls stepping beyond Sanctuary into a world that prefers its catastrophes politely unacknowledged. Back in London, a Viscount is proposing legislation to regulate arcane disturbances as if they were stray livestock. In Geneva, financiers are already speculating on what stabilized territories might mean for cross-border trade. Stabilized. Such a flattering euphemism for sterilized. Meanwhile, in Alps-de-Pierre, the Council of Elders sleeps soundly beneath a mountain being methodically drained of its spirit. They will tell themselves the forests turning to glass are transitional, that the rivers flowing backward are recalibrations, that silence is improvement. The Maestro, I suspect, sleeps less. Men like him rarely do. They prefer to stand in cathedral-sized caverns of their own making, listening to the hum of subjugated power. There is something intoxicating about converting chaos into obedience, about believing oneself the conductor of the world's final symphony. But here is the detail society is too distracted to notice. Harmony imposed by force is not harmony. It is compression. And compression, my loves, always builds toward rupture. Eamon walks toward that rupture with a song in his veins that can either heal or expose him. Alianor walks toward it, knowing sovereign responsibility does not end at one's borders. Len carries blades. The Factor carries strategy. Katerina carries guilt sharp enough to rival any weapon forged of steel. And behind them, Hawksmere shimmers, wounded but watching. Do you feel it? The shift? This is the moment when isolation ends, when sanctuary becomes strategy, when love is no longer private but geopolitical. Society will not understand until the silence reaches their own hearthstones, until their clocks stop ticking, until their carefully regulated seasons flatten into sterile sameness. By then, it may be too late, because synchronization is seductive, order is addictive. And once the world locks into one obedient chord, breaking it may shatter everything. The true war is not between armies. It is between song and silence, between wild resonance and engineered quiet, between a maestro who believes he can perfect the world and a warden dominion that knows perfection without soul is extinction. Oh, my darlings, pack lightly. The mountains are screaming, and the next movement of this symphony will not be played in drawing rooms. It will be played in the heart of a machine.